Hello again. I should perhaps explain that the topic of this morning's video has been prompted by events in my personal life. As more observant viewers might perhaps have noticed, I'm not filming in my usual location. In fact, I'm in Wales again for a few days, which would explain why the quality of these little films is somewhat different from usual. I'm using the webcam of my laptop rather than a dedicated camera to do the filming. More about Wales in a minute. In the 1950s and 1960s, those residential areas near the centre of big cities like London and Birmingham tended to be lived in by working class people, the better off types which we found in suburbs on the very edge of the cities. So it was that I was born in Custom House down by the London docks, and then we moved to Bethnal Green. I had many relatives in East Ham, which is today known as Newham. Then we made a leap in respectability and moved to Seven Kings. It was to these impoverished areas that many of the immigrants from India and the Caribbean moved during the post-war years, until by the 1970s some parts of what were by then becoming known as the inner city had bits of them in which whole streets were occupied by Jamaicans or Pakistanis. Not everybody liked this, and so as time went by, any white people with sufficient money or enough get up and go moved out of those places and went to live further out towards the suburbs. As they left, their houses were required by foreigners and immigrants, and the remaining white people were even more desperate to move away. This then is the process known as white flight, and it accounts for places like Tower Hamlets and Brixton in the centre of London, which became more or less ghettos of different ethnicities. Before moving to the Epping Forest district, where we now live in 1999, we lived in Tottenham. During the 1990s, there was a fair sprinkling of professional white people living there, people like us who had found that property was really cheap and who believed the rumours that Tottenham would soon become gentrified. This never happened, and gradually all the white people left, particularly those with children. It usually happened when the kids were coming up to secondary school age, and the parents couldn't face the prospect of their children attending some of the worst schools in London. Some moved to Hyams Park and Chingford, places like that, but alas, the multicultural society was moving outwards almost as rapidly as they were, and they soon found that the area where they moved had become nearly as vibrant and lively as Tottenham. We thought we had played a blinder by leapfrogging all those suburbs, leaving London entirely and settling in Essex. When first we arrived in Loughton 23 years ago, there was not a single foreigner or black person to be seen in the town. We devised a slogan for Loughton Council, which was never adopted. It was "Welcome to Loughton, the town immigration forgot." Alas, all good things come to an end, and in the last few years, all the houses in our street that have changed hands have been sold to Bulgarians, Romanians, and Pakistanis. It is almost as common now to hear Romanian being spoken by mothers on their way to school with their children as it is to hear English. The local church, St Nicholas in Rectory Lane, was a lovely little place. It has now been sold to the Romanian Orthodox Church, and so on Sundays the nearby street is crammed with Romanians. They evidently like the area because many of them are buying property round there. I have no prejudice against Romanians, and our Bulgarian neighbours are perfectly pleasant and we get on well with them. But as I approach my twilight years, I want to hear English spoken, and I want to have neighbours with whom I share a common heritage. I want to mix with people whose fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers fought in the British Army, people who did not have to sit a citizenship test and then buy a passport to become British. In short, I want to see my own people around me. Which leads me to what I'm doing here. We've decided to give London and its surroundings up as a bad job and move to a little market town in Wales. We bought this place last year and are in the process of doing it up with a view to moving here when we've done so. It's a very old house, part Tudor with Georgian bits added on. There are many problems with it and it's likely to cost a fortune to fix, but that is more than compensated for by the sheer pleasure of being in a town which reminds me of how Britain was when I was a child. You can see we have all sorts of old beams and cracks and all kinds of other things. Everybody here has a common set of values. They smile, there's hardly any crime, and the level of courtesy is quite astonishing. A number of people we know in Epping Forest are also moving right away from London to Norfolk and further. Anything to get where they can relax with their own people. I hope that viewers will be patient if I'm not able to respond too readily to questions and so on, because the internet here is not all that could be desired. I shall be turning out some videos here, but normal service may not be resumed until Friday.